have prayer and we will begin. Thank you, God, for the day and now the gathering of our family in this place. We're grateful, God, that we can study together, that we can learn from each other, that we can delve deeply into your word to understand it and how it will affect our lives in a positive way. We thank you for your love for us expressed in so many ways, and we ask that you would bless those in need and help us to be available in those situations. And all of us are thinking about people right now. Forgive us when we fall short. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Last week we began this turning your troubles into triumphs. We began with the idea of wanting to be overcomers. No matter what we think about the trials and the troubles of life, we want to be people who overcome. And that's what Paul said to the Romans in chapter 12. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So we want to be people who overcome. The plan from this point will be, I have two sections that I've grouped a number of things under. Some of you followed through and sent me some ideas about things people might say in difficult times that just aren't the right thing to say. And I also ask that you send me some things that are the right things to say. And with some of those that I have, I've grouped them into two areas, the ones that are not good, the ones that are, under two concepts. And we're going to study them in that way. And then the second half, probably or so, I want to be specific. And I want to go back and look at specific things. And how do we take that specific thing and turn it into a triumph? But in order to get to that point, we have to be able to assess the situation well. We also have to be able to help others understand the situation, and then we can offer some help. And so that's what this is designed to do. And I have them grouped under two things. I want to group everything that is said in an inaccurate way. I'm going to say inappropriate, just inaccurate, because sometimes there are pieces of it that work, but a lot that doesn't. So some inaccurate things, and then there are some accurate ways to group things. And for our study, the inaccurate things are going to be grouped under the heading, all things happen for a reason. And the accurate things are going to be grouped under the heading, there's value in the valley. And so if you think of tonight some other things that are inaccurate that people say, or things that accurately say, this is how you deal with difficulties, and I'll still be taking those. And we're going to look tonight beginning, and ever how long it takes us weeks-wise, 1 or 2 or 3, to go through these. That's what I want to do. So everything happens for a reason. There are two ways to consider this, and I put it this way on purpose because most of us have either heard or said, well, everything happens for a reason. And while and we're going to see that that's true, but we're also going to see that it's not true, especially how most people see it. Well, Al Morris is out on furlough. What time do you have to be back at the prison?
Are you taking my name in vain?
Yes. Absolutely. So, everything happens for a reason. Well, there is a way in which that is true. So, for instance, Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through 21. I'm going to slide this down to keep the popping out a little bit. All right. Galatians 5:19. If you look at that list of the works of the flesh, those things have obvious effects in the lives of other people. Because some people sin, those things that they do cause consequences in other people's lives. We all know about that. So to say everything happens for a reason, one might look at this and say, well, drunkenness might cause someone to drive a car and kill somebody. Well, what was the reason the person died? Because of a drunk driver. But when people say everything happens for a reason, that's not what they mean. The accurate way of understanding it is true. This person died because that person drove the car. Okay, I get that. Or you have all of these other things that are listed there. You could see how that every one of them would have some kind of consequence. And you would say, well, that is what caused this trouble or this trial, and we would be right. But that's not what people mean when they say everything happens for a reason. If you say it properly, then it is true that sometimes things happen because of people sinning. All right, number 2. It is true that we face trials as the consequence of our own sin. Now, that's also a fact. Look at 1 Chronicles. I like this passage because of the way he words it. 1 Chronicles chapter 10 and verse 13. So Saul died for his unfaithfulness, which he had committed against the Lord, because he did not keep the word of the Lord, and also because he consulted a medium for guidance. He did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore, he killed him and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse. Okay? It is true that his sin cost him his life in the story of King Saul. And the text says God killed him. Well, now, that's as bad as that is, that doesn't say anything against the nature of God. It's not as though that is something against his nature. He's punished people with death many times. So if one is saying it happens for a reason, and the reason is, at least in Scripture, this person died because of his sin. Well, that would absolutely be true. In Ezekiel 18 and verse 4, the prophet reminds us that the Son will not suffer for the sin of the Father, but he will suffer for his own sin. So it is true. If you mean, when you say everything happens for a reason, if you mean when I sin, whatever consequences that come from my sin, that's the reason. Well, that would be true. But that's not what people mean when they say everything happens for a reason. And finally, third, sometimes we just face troubles. I probably should put the word trouble instead of trial, as consequences of the fallen world. Well, when you read Genesis 3:14-19, I'm always interested, especially when I'm dealing with high school kids. It happened last semester. I'm talking to this high school class, and we were talking about some things that I had occasion to refer to Genesis 3, and you read there what God did in response to their sin. And the first one was pain in childbearing. And they're having a hard time wrapping their minds around, you mean without sin there would be no pain in childbearing? Well, that appears to be the case. And they just Their minds just can't grab that. But if you think about all the things that God said would happen, well, sure, because of the fallen world, what happened in that, the reason that we have these things is because of sin entered the world. Or, Romans 8 is a fascinating passage because in verses 19 through 22, Paul even says specifically that the whole creation is groaning because of the curse from sin. And I can't help but think, when you read that passage, you think about what he said in the garden after the sin. Now you'll till the garden with weeds and thorns and thistles. And we maybe don't think about it from this standpoint as much. That's a way of God saying, okay, Adam, now it's going to be tough work to eke out a living for yourself. But what he's also saying is, the earth was cursed. It's almost as though the earth was not meant to have, of course, thorns and thistles and problems, and yet because of sin, the earth groans. If you've ever been to the Creation Museum, if you haven't, go. Number two, if you have, you may remember the video depiction of Noah's flood and how it happened. And of course, the way that God caused that water not only involved water from above, but it involved water trapped inside the earth's crust. And he broke up, the text says, he broke up the fountains of the deep. And I think they're right. In that video, they portray the pathway of the broken up earth that let the water come up is the same part that now are the fault lines for earthquakes.
I have come to believe that even what we call natural laws, gravity and laws of physics, the way we understand them, are really just the way God usually does things. And occasionally God has changed the way he usually does things. Think about there was no rain before the flood, for example. He usually did the watering of the earth in a way, and now he usually does it a different way. So even the laws of physics, as we understand, are not laws at all. They're the way God usually does things. It's important for us to have a consistent environment to interact in. But they're not laws in the sense, in any sense beyond what God has chosen.
Sure, they are reflections of not only God's nature, but how God operates in his nature. That makes perfect sense, sure.
When sometimes some bad things happen, you go people mention scripture, Romans 8:28.
We're not there. We're not there yet. Next. We're going to get there. Go ahead.
I was just thinking how that the rules that science makes up and humans make up, they're merely trying to explain what God has done, without, of course, attributing it to God. But the rules that humans make are only based on our perception of what God has done. And so many times it's the wrong perception, or it doesn't have the whole picture. And so then the rules have to be rewritten because more is figured out, like with gravity or the Earth going around the sun instead of the sun around the Earth, you know.
Well, all that proves is that sometimes men make up things that are just not right. And they have to start over based on what is. And true science does not end up at Darwinian evolution. True science ends up at creation. That's right.
Mike, are you saying then that avalanches over I-70 out west, floods and droughts that injure and kill people, all that is under your point C?
I think so. I think that all of that is here because of the flood of Noah.
A groaning earth.
Yes, a groaning earth. Yes, absolutely. One of the best books ever written on that topic for me, Henry Morris, John C. Whitcomb wrote a book called The Genesis Flood. Two creation scientists, but they just explain how through water pressure, water movement, through the ways that God got the water and the amount of land to water ratio that's different now, all those things combine to tell us why things are the way they are right now. It's a fascinating book if you want to check it out.
You know, I guess I know where you're headed with this, but to me, aren't we really trying to understand God's intervention in our daily lives? Is the explanation of this telling us whether God is in intimate ways in everything? You know, the law passed upon Job or Matthias. Is God in every flip of the coin, or just in some that are recorded for our history? It was God intervening in times before Jesus, but now lets the natural world take its course and stands back and reveals His full word, and then we live in this world without God's intervention?
I don't think so. I think God is still involved, even though He does not involve Himself maybe in the exact same way He has in the past with, for instance, obvious miracles through the agency of humans. But to say, as Thomas Jefferson tried to say, that God has created and then backed off and just lets it go, I'm not a fan of that either. But to say that God, well, let's move to point 2, because that gets us to where we are. You see, when people... Go ahead, Ron.
Observation. I think we have to acknowledge when we're talking about God's intervention in our lives that there are, I'm going to say this, and I know some people are going to be queasy about it, but I'll say it anyway. There are limits to what God can do in this respect. God cannot arrange nature so that two men walking in opposite directions can both be walking uphill at the same time, or downhill at the same time. And so, you know, when you start to explain things, there are some things that are just going to be logically the way they are. And so, I think our framework, whatever framework we devise for ourselves, we have to acknowledge that.
Well, I think your point is well taken. I wonder about your illustration. If we're both on top of the mountain and walking in different directions, are we going down?
Two men walking toward each other.
Oh, that way. Oh, okay. Meeting each other. Okay. Going up the mountain. I don't know. Anyway, here's the point. When we say everything happens for a reason, people say that. Most of the time, when I hear them say that, I think they're saying, God looked down and said, boom, this is going to happen, so that something else can happen. I think that's what people mean. In some way, and I'm not saying that people are impugning God. In fact, I think when they say that, most of the time, they're trying to honor God. They believe so strongly that God is in charge that to say every time something happens, God just reached down and made it happen, is their way of honoring God and His will working in our daily lives. That's where we are. That's what they mean. And so the question is that right? Well, let's divide it into some discussions, and if we can finish, then then fine tonight. If not, we'll finish it up next time. Now, the first thing I would say is, as to why it's not true, is because sometimes when you say everything happens, you see the reason, and yet sometimes there are things that just don't make any sense. I don't understand them. I don't understand them. And so, if I'm trying to say everything happens for a reason, sometimes they say, I don't know what it is, but I know it's there. I don't know what the reason is, but I'm convinced there is one. Well, after a while, there are people who just cannot figure it out. In fact, to attribute some of these really bad things that happen to God's direct intervention is the number one challenge to the existence of God from the perspective of an atheist.
I have a problem with the whole concept that, everything is God's responsibility and He controls everything.
Right.
Because if that's true, then we don't have free will.
That's right. And that's my point. That's my point. I think, obviously, that the two extremes are he's backed off and does nothing, or he micromanages like the puppet master. And I don't believe either of those. Somewhere in here, God is operating, but we want to teach the proper way to see how God operates during the troubles of life. This is an extremely important discussion. Because not only is it true that it is, by most accounts, it is the number one argument that atheists have against God. That either he is unable to see it, unable to stop it, or does not care that it's going on. So when you see troubles and trials and strife and suffering, one of those three things has to be true with God. That's what they say. So either he can't see it, he can't stop it, or he doesn't even care that it's happening. If any one of those things is true, then he's not God. That's what they say. So it is a stumbling block that creates a problem for people who don't believe in God. But number two, it's an important topic that we need to talk about, because even people who believe in God stumble oftentimes when things are tough, because they don't understand God either. And so it's not outside of the realm of importance. This is a very important point that all of us need to understand. We're not just talking about some person over here getting sick. Now, how am I going to take my sickness and make something good come out of it? Well, there's a time that we're going to talk about something on that level. But until we're able to establish a mindset and an understanding of how God is connected or not to the difficulties of life, we can't then move on and say, in this particular difficulty, we need to do this. That's why we're having this particular study moving to that point. So, here is the main point. It is not true that God is the direct cause behind each trial. It's just not. People say it all the time. Why did God do this? I want to begin in James chapter 1 and verse 17. James 1, verse 17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. What does the word good mean?
Complete.
Well, it probably fits with the word, the perfect next to it probably is the complete word, but yet they go together. Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
In this context, good would be a gift that's appropriate for whatever the occasion is.
What do most people, or what do even we, most of the time, maybe, think the word good means? How do most people look at the word good?
Something pleasant.
Yeah, pleasant. Feels good, looks good, I like it. It's all about me, right? This is not good food because I don't like how it tastes. I don't understand the concept. My grandson's like that. I don't understand it. But it's there. Or I don't like, you just put in whatever you want. It's not good because I don't like it. Good is what I like. And if I don't like it, it's not good. Now that's basically what most people, that's the default idea for good. But now Ralph says, and I think he's right, good is not that. Good is what is beneficial for the situation. Right? A person gets gangrene in a hand or an arm. Do they like the idea of cutting their arm off? Of course not. But is it good if it saves your life? Is it beneficial for a higher purpose? Sure. And when we read the text then, and it says, every good gift and every perfect gift, now again, complete, put perfect and good together. Why does he use two terms, good and perfect? What do you think? It's what now? To stress the point. So a double positive, as it were. Could be. What else? Yep.
Not all things that are good for us are pleasant.
Well, that's true. That's true. What else? Go ahead.
One from man, one from God.
Ooh, interesting. One from man, one from God. Would you put the one from God as perfect? One from man is good. Interesting. It may be that they connect in this way. Good is whatever fits the cause that is within God's plan, and perfect means that it completely fulfills every part. So it's the thing and its accomplishment, maybe. It is good and it is perfect. Maybe it's the thing and the effect, good and perfect. I don't know. These are all good suggestions. But the idea is, if we read it from the standpoint of what we may most often use the word good, meaning I like it, then all of a sudden, this passage doesn't make any sense. Right?
Not always good in God's sight.
That's exactly right.
We're looking at that that's from a human perspective.
Yeah.
It's not from God's perspective.
There you go. And so we have to see it from his perspective in order to understand it. So what I know is this: God is not involved in every single thing that happens as though he caused it. Because in order for that to be true, wouldn't he have to have a hand in the sinful or the sin of that person to bring about this other thing? Would that be the same as saying he put the drink in the person's hand, put the keys in the car, drove the car, and swerved into somebody?
Is there room for acknowledgement that God may not be the proximal cause, but may still be a cause? And I'll give this example. If I fall off my chair, I think it is God's animating power that expresses itself as gravity, and so I fall. But that doesn't mean that he pushed me off the chair. And so it is his power that causes me to fall, but yet he didn't cause me to fall.
Go ahead.
I'm going to stand up because I can't see you sometimes.
I'll just come here and sit
There's
beside
two,
you.
three things that this has prompted me to say.
Yeah.
If we recognize that God is all-powerful, that he knows all things, and that he is everywhere, that's his nature.
Yes.
If we can start with that, then we know that all this that we're talking about is entirely within the purview of God. Now, to go into a specific case, we can have examples, and in our lives we will have incidents and events and conditions, and we won't know what's going on. So I think this is where we have to rely on faith. Knowing what we believe about God and all of his encompassing qualities, then the things that I don't know and can't figure out, I think my faith makes it possible to be at peace with all of them. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be trying to resolve.
Right.
I'm just saying we aren't going to get it all resolved. So I need to be at peace about that with my faith in God.
That's a very good reminder. And it's not as though we can figure out every answer, but what we can do is figure out some things we know are not true. And maybe that's the best we can do sometimes. I can know that X is not true and Y is not true and Z is not true. I may not know everything that is true, but I can know things that aren't. And so when we talk about this particular topic, you can't help but get into the age-old discussion. I've mentioned it many times. If you get a chance on Amazon to look for this book, it is purely phenomenal. It's about that big. And I stumbled across it. It was written in the 1800s, late 1800s, and by a guy named Leslie D. Weatherhead. It's called The Will of God. And he just blew my mind. It totally changed my perspective of understanding how God is involved in our daily world. Because all of these discussions say this. One, God has an ultimate will. And his ultimate will is expressed as, I want you to go to heaven. That's his ultimate will. No doubt about it. He wants that to happen. Give you an aside here right quick. DeAndre, who is the preacher over at Fairfax in West Virginia, in Winchester, came over here today, and he wanted to start I don't know how often it's going to be, but he wants the two of us to have a Bible question answer 5 to 8 or 10 minutes. So we videoed the first one, and it's on the will of God. Well, Monday at our preachers meeting, we were talking about these things, and let me show you something that is, to me, quite fascinating. Look at 1 Timothy chapter 2. All of this fits, by the way, even though it seems not. 1 Timothy chapter 2. This is a text you know well, that we're at verse 1. Prayer, supplication, intercession, giving and thanks should be made for all men, for kings, all in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. This is good and acceptable in the sight of God. All men to be saved and to come desires everyone to be saved. The text, the context, all men. Pray for all men. He wants all men to be saved. I think I may have, for a long time, misused the other passage. 2 Peter chapter 3. Verse 9. 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Not willing. Well, that there's a Greek word over here in 1 Timothy 2, and there's another Greek word in 2 Peter 3. And the Greek word over here in 1 Timothy 2 means, this is what I wish. This is what I wish. I wish that everybody could be in heaven. That's what God's saying. And that's the context, everybody. But I failed to see the context before of 2 Peter 3. 2 Peter 3, verse 9, not willing, different word. This word means, I guarantee this will of mine is going to happen. This is only about Christian people. I've become convinced that this text is not dealing with generally people. It's dealing with God's people. His promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us. Now remember, Peter's writing during a time when the church is being persecuted. And they're wondering, where is the promise? Where is his promise? When is he going to come back? That's what he said in verse 4. Well, who's asking for his promise? It's the people of God. They're concerned. They're going through persecution and trouble. We're tired of this. When is he going to come back? We're ready to stop this. And Peter goes on to say, verse 8, 1,000 years is with the Lord as a day, and a day is 1,000 years. But don't think he's forgotten you. Be patient. And so he's telling Christian people in verse 9 that he's not willing that any of them should perish. And I guarantee you, he says, it's not going to happen. Nobody who is his child, who is faithful to him, is going to be lost. So it's a guarantee in this passage. It's a wish in 1 Timothy 4. Because those people have to come to know the truth. These people have the truth. And so now we're talking about, what does God will? What does God, he wishes everybody to be saved, and he guarantees that his people will be. Let's talk about, then, this ultimate will. Then there is his ideal will. Mr. Weatherhead put it this way. The Garden of Eden expresses his ideal will. He established a paradise on earth and said, this is ideally how I want things to be. And you look at everything that was in the garden. That's the ideal. Now sin came in. Now the ideal is gone. And the ideal has been replaced with the circumstantial. Because of the circumstance of sin, this is how things are. But whether we were talking ideal will or circumstantial will, neither of those negates his ultimate will. From the time he created, he wanted everybody to be saved. That's the ultimate. But because of sin, the ideal was replaced by the circumstantial. So to say, as Ron has suggested, that God is involved in everything that happens is true because he allows it to happen. Does he have the power to stop it? Yes, he does. But he, because of free will and choice, allows it to happen. So every time something happens, it is within his will. But it's not within his ultimate will or his ideal will, maybe, but it is within his circumstantial will. Death is here. Not because that's his ideal will, but because it is his circumstantial will. So it is true that everything happens under the will of God, but you have to be specific and clear to understand what that means. To say that God reached down and poked somebody is not what that means. It means he is involved, yes, but not necessarily in every single action.
In my mind, there's two sides to this sentence here. There's the one side, not willing that any should perish, contrasted by this, but that all should come to repentance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you're a Christian, then you've already achieved repentance, so there's no repentance to be had. So who is, well, I mean, I don't know the Greek. Maybe you can tell me, if you base your argument upon that first part. I think the second part, doesn't that contradict?
No, because what he's saying is, I want everybody, but I'm guaranteeing that my people. So, bulimai is the word, and it's a more specific form of will. He wants everybody; it's his wish, but he guarantees that his people. And if you want to come to repentance, you'll be one of his people, and that's what he guarantees. He's not willing; he is guaranteeing. Yes. Yes. That's right. That's right. Very good. I'm glad you brought that out. That's good.
My only, I guess you could say, criticism of the Eden and the post-Eden. I've always felt like God wanted men of faith.
Sure.
From the beginning.
Sure.
But I don't think Eden produced men of faith. Eden wouldn't produce faith. It was only a broken world that produced faith. And,
Well,
here's where I'm struggling with your idea.
I understand that, but the reason that we have a hard time is because we don't have any information about length of time and what happened in the garden to know whether faith could have been produced. But we know that faith has been produced since there. However, the mere fact that if you, in the garden, seeing that tree you're not supposed to eat, don't eat it. And by avoiding it, based upon faith in God, they had never heard, they don't know what death is, don't know what separation is because he's walking with them in the garden. And every time they see that fruit and go, nope, God said no. Isn't that faith?
But we learned faith is grown through trials.
It is now.
Why wasn't it then?
Because it wasn't.
Because there was no trials.
Right. But the faith there was expressed in a different way, meaning if the fruit that was there was a temptation, which it was, meaning I would like it, according to Satan, he made it a temptation, but you don't eat it, then that's a way of going through. So I see your point, but the only other thing I would say, if that's true, then in God's ideal situation, faith was never an option. Maybe so. Maybe faith became an option after the circumstances changed. That's possible.
Satan an angel to begin with?
Yes, I think he was. Yep.
Two things.
Yep.
Faith comes by hearing the word of God.
There it is.
They heard.
They heard.
So that should have produced faith in them.
That's true.
The second thing is God isn't surprised
Good question.
by anything.
Good question.
If he's God, and as Al said, and I totally agree, if he's God and He's all powerful, then He knows everything, and He knew everything that would ever happen. And being God, He knew what was going to happen in every situation. And whether He set something in motion before eternity that is happening right now, we don't know. We're not in eternity.
No, but he did get involved at times as a way of doing something. That's right.
He did, and that brings us to the point, or to the subject of prayer. Because prayer doesn't change anything. God doesn't change His mind about anything.
And we will get there as well. We're going to start on the outline right where we left off next week. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Good evening. We could prepare ourselves for a song. I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. I will enter his courts with praise. I will say this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad.
They're just not. And they're trying to find a way to be happy. There's a hole in their hearts. And they're trying to fill that hole with whatever at the moment deadens the feeling of the hole. There are all kinds of things that people turn to avoid filling the hole with God. And when they turn to those things, for a moment, they're okay. Because it's like taking pain medicine. The pain medicine makes the pain go away for a while. But inevitably, it comes back. And until the healing takes place, the pain's going to keep coming back. And so people who are having or who have a spiritual hole and they're trying to fill it with physical things, it takes the pain away for a little while. But it masks the fact that they're not healed. There are a lot of people who right now are just covering up the fact that they're not happy, that they don't have relationship with the Lord, that they don't have their hole in their hearts filled. I think Kelly does. And I think there are many like her who do. Tonight, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." That word rest is Jesus saying, I will fill the hole, and I will give you ultimate peace. Real peace. Not the kind where you just cover it up for a little while, but real peace. And every one of us knows that there are people right now in situations where all they're doing is medicating for the moment without filling the real need. Jesus says, I'll fill the real need. He doesn't guarantee that it'll take the pain away, but he guarantees that he will make it all better one day. So we can fight him here and miss him over there. Or we can decide right now, I'm going to fill the hole in my life with a relationship with Jesus. And while it may not always feel good, it will be restful spiritually as we head for eternity. Tonight, if you need the Lord, he wants you. If you need him, we're ready to meet you at the front. You'll come as we stand and sing.
To Canaan's land I'm on my way, where the soul